to talk about intimacy with your wife or not to talk about it? That's the question. This came up in for those of you who don't know, I'm doing a new program, a new activity called First Friday Ask Me Anything About Your Marriage. And this month I was talking with Paul, who was sharing that his marriage has basically been sexless. Not for weeks, not for months, but for years. I'm Leslie, Dory's your marriage coach, and this is a problem that unfortunately is way too common. And what makes it worse for Paul is that his wife absolutely, unequivocally refuses to talk about it. Now, in my book, nobody gets to opt out of a major aspect of marriage, and intimacy is a major aspect. Now, I understand it is really tough to talk about. Probably not in the beginning, although I do know somebody else who's basically, they were having sex before they got married, and then as soon as they got married, sex stopped. And he, like Paul, couldn't talk to his wife about it. Now, intimacy is huge. Intimacy isn't just sex. It's affection. It's connecting on an emotional level. It's having intellectual conversations. It's even engaging in spiritual conversations. It's intimacy. Translates into me you see, right? It's a way of knowing each other very, very deeply. And the problem when people try to have conversations about their sex life is, one, they frequently pick the wrong time to have the conversation. Two, they aren't prepared to hear their partner's position. Now, I know this from personal experience. My husband and I have been together for almost 40 years. And through those 40 years, our intimate life has ebbed and flowed. It's never disappeared altogether. But we've raised two children. We've had all the normal ups and downs and ins and outs that marriages have. And and there was at one point in time in which he was not really happy, and he tried to talk to me about it, and I put him off because it's uncomfortable. And finally, we sat down and had the conversation. And I'm not going to lie. In our 40 years together, that was the one conversation that I would say was the most difficult one for us to have. And even using every single tool and skill that I had, it almost went off the rails. So I get how hard it is to talk about it. It's very personal. We have to be willing to hear things that we don't want to hear. You have to be willing to share things that are difficult because it makes you incredibly vulnerable. That's the part of intimacy, right? It's being able to be vulnerable with your partner about these things that matter. And unfortunately, most of us don't do well in these conversations. Or we just don't want to have them. But the longer you don't have them, the harder they become to have. Now, if you've got a good, strong, solid relationship, then I'm not going to say those conversations are easy. They're not. But if you have them more regularly, they become easier. So what do you do if you're like Paul and you've been in a sexless marriage and your partner does not want to have the conversation? Because, by the way, this can go either way. I actually have a really good friend whose husband has no interest in sex. So it's not a gender thing. Although it does tend to be more that men are pushing that or want that for a lot of different reasons, none of which are bad. But having that conversation is really, really tough. And if you're not, and intimacy is very, very complicated. Or things that impact it. Stress impacts it. Time of life impacts it. Physical challenges impact it. I was talking to somebody the other day who's going through perimenopause. That's going to change it. As we get older, things change, whether we like it or not. And, but if you have a habit of talking to your partner about this, it's going to make it a lot easier. And so that's what I'm inviting you to do. I understand that it can be really difficult. And I understand you probably have tried. So my first thing would be to think back to those conversations and see if you can figure out what went wrong. All right. And it's going to be important to continue to try to engage. And sometimes it can be just asking your partner why they don't want to have a conversation about it. Forget the actual topic itself. Let's just talk about what makes it difficult. But anytime you open the door to these tough conversations, you have to be willing to hear things you don't want to hear. And that in itself is a skill. And if you want to know how to have these tough conversations, I actually have a guide to those that will walk you step by step through how to set up these conversations and go through them successfully. And by the way, I'm going to tell you, it's not easy because, like I said, that conversation with my husband, I was using every skill and technique I had. And like I said, it still almost went off the rails. So I get it. But I'm inviting you not to just sit and suffer in silence, because I can guarantee you that will destroy, maybe not your marriage, but certainly the love and affection you have for each other. So if you're interested in getting that guide to tackling tough conversations, just put yes, I want the guide in the comments below and I will get it for you. Okay. So hopefully you found this helpful, and until next week, stay loving.